Have you ever gotten so excited about a car name, only to see the actual car and feel like someone just punched your childhood right in the gut? Yeah, we've all been there. Car companies love digging through their history, pulling out legendary names and slapping them on something that has absolutely no business wearing that badge. Sometimes it works. The new Bronco? Brilliant. The modern Challenger? Chef's kiss. But other times you get what we're about to show you. Today, we're counting down the top 10 worst performance car name revivals of all time. These are the cars that took iconic names and absolutely butchered them. If you're a car lover, hit that like button and subscribe because this one's going to sting a little. Number 10. The 1984 Ford Mustang GT350. So here's the thing about the Shelby GT350. By the early 1980s, the original 1965 through 1970, Shelby Mustang GT350 had reached absolutely legendary status. Carroll Shelby himself had transformed the Mustang into a racing weapon. These cars were dominating tracks. They were winning championships. They had become some of the most sought-after American performance cars ever built. The name GT350 meant something. It meant you were getting a Mustang that had been touched by Shelby's genius, a car that was fundamentally different from what rolled off the regular Ford assembly line. So, what did Ford do in 1984? They decided to celebrate 20 years of Mustang production by releasing a special edition called the GT350. And on paper, the idea wasn't terrible. The 1982 Mustang GT had been a genuine hit, and by 1984, the Mustang GT was one of America's favorite performance cars. But here's where it all falls apart. The 1984 GT350 was essentially just a Mustang GT with a unique Oxford white exterior, some red accent stripes, and a red interior. That was it. No extra horsepower, no track-tuned suspension, no special engine modifications, nothing that actually set it apart from the standard GT in any meaningful performance way. It looked sharp, sure, and Ford had no trouble selling all 5,260 units they produced. But the perception problem was massive. The GT350 name was supposed to mean something special, something above and beyond, and Ford just didn't deliver that. The GT350 never returned for 1985. Ford clearly realized they'd made a mistake. And to their credit, when they finally brought the GT350 name back again for the 2016 model year, they made absolutely sure it had substantially more horsepower than the standard Mustang GT and a proper track-tuned suspension. Lesson learned, but it took over 30 years. The whole episode is a textbook case of what happens when you try to cash in on nostalgia without actually earning it. The GT350 name carried the weight of Carroll Shelby's legacy of track victories and engineering excellence. And Ford treated it like a cosmetic package, a paint job and some stripes. That's like naming your kid after a legendary warrior and then handing him a foam sword. Number 9. The 1983 Dodge Charger. The Dodge Charger. Just saying the name conjures images of that iconic second-generation fastback from the late 1960s. The car the Duke boys drove. The car that became the Daytona with that massive rear wing that was so outrageously aerodynamic, it had to extend through the trunk to the subframe just to handle the downforce. The Charger was raw American muscle personified. A big block V8, rear-wheel drive, a shape that looked like it was doing 100 miles per hour standing still. So imagine being a Mopar fan in 1983 and hearing that the Charger was coming back. Your heart starts racing. And then you see it. A front-wheel drive subcompact based on the Dodge Omni platform with a 2.2-liter four-cylinder engine. Let that sink in for a moment. They took one of the most legendary muscle car names in American history and put it on a car derived from the Omni. The Omni. Now, in fairness, Dodge did offer Carroll Shelby tuned versions from 1983 to 1987, marketed as the Dodge Shelby Charger. the most famous being the 1987 Shelby Charger, GLHS, which squeezed 175 horsepower out of that turbocharged 2.2-liter four-cylinder. And honestly, those Shelby versions were genuinely respectable little performance cars for their era. But here's the thing. Even the fastest version couldn't convince traditional muscle car buyers that a quick four-cylinder car with front-wheel drive deserved to wear the Charger name. It was like putting a tuxedo on a house cat and expecting people to treat it like a lion. The front-wheel drive Charger was actually a sales success, but the damage to the nameplate was real. Dodge wouldn't touch the Charger name again until the 2006 model year, when they finally got it right with a rear-wheel drive, Hemi-powered sedan. Number 8. The 2002 Ford Thunderbird. The Ford Thunderbird. Now there's a name that carries serious weight in American automotive history. The original 1955 Thunderbird was Ford's answer to the Chevrolet Corvette, a gorgeous two-seat personal luxury sports car that became an instant icon. Over the decades, the T-Bird evolved through multiple generations, each one capturing something about the American automotive spirit. So when Ford announced they were reviving the Thunderbird for 2002, people were genuinely excited. And honestly, the car looked fantastic. It was a gorgeous retro convertible that beautifully recalled the 1950s originals, and the automotive press went absolutely wild when they first saw it. The concept had actually been shown back in 1999, and the response was so overwhelmingly positive that Ford greenlit the production version. But here's where the dream started cracking. Underneath that beautiful skin, the Thunderbird was running a 3.9-liter V8, making just 252 horsepower. For a car that weighed over 3,700 pounds, that was not great. The performance was adequate at best. It wasn't slow exactly, but it certainly wasn't fast. 0 to 60 took around 7.5 seconds, which was thoroughly underwhelming for something wearing the Thunderbird badge. The ride was floaty, the handling was soft, and the whole experience felt more like a Sunday cruise car than anything remotely sporty. And the problems didn't stop at performance. The car had a serious quality control issue, particularly with the convertible top mechanism. Sales started strong, driven by hype and nostalgia, but they dropped off dramatically once the initial excitement wore off. By 2005, Ford pulled the plug. The Thunderbird revival had lasted just 3 years. It wasn't a bad car, it was a perfectly pleasant cruiser. But pleasant isn't what the Thunderbird name promised, and that gap between expectation and reality is what killed it. Ford reportedly invested over $1 billion in the project, and at its peak, dealers were adding markups of $10,000 to $15,000 above sticker price. Within 2 years, those same dealers were offering massive discounts just to move inventory off the lot. The Thunderbird revival became a masterclass in how nostalgia-fueled hype can carry a car for exactly 1 model year before reality catches up. It proved that looking the part isn't enough. You have to perform the part too. Number 7. The Plymouth Prowler. Okay, technically the Prowler wasn't reviving an old nameplate, but it absolutely deserves to be on this list because of how spectacularly it failed to deliver on its own promise. When Plymouth first showed the Prowler concept in 1993, people lost their minds. It was this wild, retro-futuristic hot rod with open wheels, a long hood, and a design that looked like it had driven straight out of a 1950s fever dream. It was bold. It was outrageous. It was everything Plymouth needed to stay relevant. The concept generated enormous buzz, and Plymouth smartly decided to put it into production for 1997. And then they made a baffling decision. Under that gorgeous, aggressive hot rod body, they put a 3.5-liter V6 engine making just 214 horsepower. In a car that looked like it should have a supercharged V8 rumbling under the hood, Plymouth gave it a V6, and not even a particularly exciting one. The acceleration was disappointing. The exhaust note was anemic. The car looked like it could eat Corvettes for breakfast, but in reality, a Honda Accord could keep up with it. The Prowler weighed about 2,800 pounds, and with only 214 horsepower on tap, it was genuinely underwhelming from behind the wheel. Plymouth eventually bumped the power up to 253 horsepower for the 1999 model year, but by then the damage was done. The car that should have saved Plymouth instead became a symbol of everything wrong with Chrysler's decision-making at the time. Barely over 11,000 Prowlers were sold before Plymouth itself was discontinued in 2001. It's genuinely tragic because with a proper V8, the Prowler could have been one of the greatest American cars of the 90s. Instead, it became a cautionary tale about what happens when the marketing department writes, "Checks the engineering department can't cash." The rumors at the time were that Chrysler considered putting a V8 in the Prowler, but couldn't make it fit without redesigning the entire front end. Others say it was a cost-cutting decision from the start. Either way, the result was the same. You had this jaw-dropping hot rod that sounded like a sewing machine. People would stare at it in traffic, walk up to it at gas stations, take pictures of it in parking lots. And then the owner would start it up, and the magic would just evaporate. The Prowler looked like $1 million and drove like a rental. It's the automotive equivalent of ordering a filet mignon and getting a veggie burger on a really fancy plate. Number 6, the 2004 Pontiac GTO, the Pontiac GTO. 3 letters that changed the entire American automotive landscape. The original 1964 GTO is widely credited as the car that kicked off the entire muscle car era. It was a mid-size Pontiac Tempest with a big, powerful V8 engine crammed into it, and it became a cultural phenomenon. The GTO wasn't just a car, it was a movement. So when Pontiac announced the GTO was coming back for 2004, expectations were stratospheric. And the thing is, the car they delivered was actually really good. Under the hood sat a 5.7-liter LS1 V8, making 350 horsepower, connected to the rear wheels through either a 6-speed manual or a 4-speed automatic. The performance was legitimate. It could sprint from 0 to 60 in about 5.3 seconds, which was genuinely fast for 2004. The handling was sharp, the brakes were strong, and it was an absolute blast to drive. So, what went wrong? Well, the car was actually a rebadged Holden Monaro from Australia, and therein lay the problem. It didn't look like a GTO. It looked like, well, a generic foreign sedan that happened to be fast. The styling was anonymous. There were no hood scoops, no aggressive lines, no visual drama whatsoever. Muscle car enthusiasts took one look at it and said, no. The GTO name demanded presence, demanded that people turn their heads when it rolled by. And this car, as competent as it was, simply didn't deliver that visual punch. Pontiac tried to address the styling criticism for 2005 and 2006, adding hood scoops and bumping the engine to a 6.0-liter LS2, making 400 horsepower. But it was too late. Sales never recovered, and the GTO was discontinued after 2006. It remains one of the most underrated performance bargains of its era, but it also remains one of the most disappointing name revivals in muscle car history. A great car wearing the wrong name, or maybe a great name on the wrong-looking car. Either way, the 2004 GTO proves that performance alone isn't enough when you're carrying a legendary nameplate. You need the whole package: the sound, the look, the presence, the feeling that something special just pulled up next to you at the light. The Holden Monaro gave you the go. It just forgot to give you the show. And in the world of muscle cars, the show matters almost as much as the go. Today, unmolested examples are actually climbing in value, which is fitting. The market is finally catching up to what a few people knew all along. It was a brilliant car. It just never should have been called a GTO. Number 5. The 1985 Chevrolet Nova. The Chevrolet Nova. For generations of American car enthusiasts, the Nova was the quintessential compact muscle car. The original Nova, particularly the late 1960s and early 1970s versions, could be ordered with some seriously impressive V8 engines. A 1970 Nova SS with the 396 big block was a legitimate street terror, a lightweight compact car with way more engine than it probably should have had. The Nova name carried decades of blue-collar performance credibility. It was the working person's muscle car, the car that proved you didn't need to spend a fortune to go fast. So when Chevrolet revived the Nova name in 1985, people expected, well, something with at least a hint of that heritage. What they got was a rebadged Toyota Sprinter built at the NUMMI plant in Fremont, California. Yes, you read that right. The new Chevrolet Nova was a Toyota, a perfectly competent, thoroughly reliable, utterly boring Toyota economy car wearing a bow tie. It had a 1.6-liter four-cylinder engine making 74 horsepower. 74. The original Nova SS made 375 horsepower from its big block. The new one couldn't outrun a strong headwind. Now, was it a bad car? Not at all. It was actually quite good at what it did. Reliable, fuel-efficient, practical. Everything a sensible economy car should be. But that's precisely the problem. Nobody wanted a sensible economy car called Nova. The Nova name promised excitement, promised that rumble when you turned the key, promised at least the possibility of leaving some rubber on the road. Instead, it delivered 40 miles per gallon and a 0 to 60 time that could be measured with a calendar. Chevrolet discontinued the Nova badged Toyota in 1988 and replaced it with the Geo Prism, which was essentially the same car with a name that didn't carry any performance expectations. Smart move, honestly. Some names should just be left alone. The irony is that the NUMMI-built Nova was actually one of the better cars GM was selling at the time, thanks entirely to Toyota's manufacturing quality. It was more reliable than practically anything else in Chevrolet's lineup. But reliability isn't what makes a name legendary. Nobody ever told stories about how their Nova got great gas mileage. They told stories about how their Nova ate Camaros at the Strip. Chevrolet took a name that meant something visceral and attached it to something sensible. And in the car world, sensible is the enemy of excitement. Number 4. The 1978 Dodge Challenger, the original Dodge Challenger. Just hearing those words takes you back to the glory days of American muscle. The 1970 through 1974 Challenger was Dodge's pony car entry, a beast that could be equipped with some of Chrysler's most legendary high-performance engines, the 446-pack, the legendary 426 Hemi, the 346-pack. These were engines that turned the Challenger into a street legend. The car itself was gorgeous with muscular lines and an aggressive stance that told you exactly what it was about before you even heard it start. When the original muscle car era ended in the mid-1970s, the Challenger went with it. But by the late 70s, there was renewed buyer interest in performance cars, and Dodge thought it was the perfect time for a revival. So in 1978, they brought back the Challenger name on a rebadged Mitsubishi Galant Lambda, a front-wheel drive Japanese import with a 2.6-liter four-cylinder engine. This wasn't even a case of putting a legendary name on a mediocre car. This was a completely different vehicle from a completely different country, wearing the skin of an American legend. The Mitsubishi-based Challenger was available as a coupe and a hatchback, and it had absolutely nothing in common with the original car except the badge on the back. The performance was modest at best, the styling was generic late 70s Japanese economy car, and the whole thing felt like a corporate cost-cutting exercise disguised with a famous name. The rebadged Challenger stuck around for a few years before mercifully disappearing. And here's the thing that makes it even worse. When Dodge finally did the Challenger revival properly with the 2008 model, they proved they knew exactly what the name meant. Retro styling, a Hemi V8, rear-wheel drive, massive presence, everything the 1978 version wasn't. The Mitsubishi Challenger is something Mopar people definitely don't like to talk about, and honestly, who can blame them? What makes this entry particularly painful is the sheer audacity of the gap between the original and the revival. We're talking about a car that could be ordered with a 426 Hemi, one of the most powerful production engines ever built, being succeeded by a Japanese economy car that struggled to get out of its own way. The power difference between a fully loaded original Challenger and the Mitsubishi version wasn't just a gap, it was a canyon. It was the Grand Canyon. It was the Grand Canyon at night with no guardrails. The only silver lining is that it was mercifully short-lived, lasting only until 1983. Number 3. The 2019 Chevrolet Blazer, the Chevrolet Blazer. Few names in the SUV world carry as much weight and nostalgia as the Blazer. The original K5 Blazer, introduced in 1969, was Chevrolet's answer to the Ford Bronco and International Scout. It was a genuine off-road machine, body-on-frame construction, a removable roof, powerful V8 engines, real four-wheel drive that could take you places most cars wouldn't dare venture. The Blazer was tough, capable, and genuinely cool. It became an icon of American adventure. Generations of families took their Blazers on hunting trips, camping expeditions, and weekend trail rides. So, when Chevrolet announced the Blazer was returning for 2019, the timing seemed perfect. Ford had just revealed their upcoming Bronco revival, which would turn out to be a massive success. Surely Chevrolet would answer with something equally rugged and capable, right? Wrong. What Chevrolet delivered was a front-wheel drive-based crossover SUV with absolutely zero off-road pretensions. No body-on-frame construction, no removable roof. No serious four-wheel drive system. Instead, they took some aggressive styling cues from the Camaro, slapped them onto a generic midsize unibody crossover platform, and called it a Blazer. The automotive press was not kind. One reviewer described looking into the face of the new Blazer and seeing nothing but tired marketing avarice and a cynical contempt for automotive history. And the sales numbers tell the story. After peaking at about 94,600 units in 2020, sales dropped steadily every single year. By 2024, the Blazer hit an all-time low of just 52,576 units. The gas-powered Blazer is reportedly being dropped after the 2025 model year. Meanwhile, Ford's properly executed Bronco revival has been a smashing success. It's almost painful how perfectly this illustrates the difference between doing a name revival right and doing it wrong. Ford looked at the Bronco's heritage and built something that honored it. Chevrolet looked at the Blazer's heritage and built something you could lose in a parking lot. The contrast with Ford's approach could not be more stark. Ford looked at the Bronco's DNA, its off-road roots, its removable doors and roof, and they built a modern vehicle that genuinely honored all of that. Chevrolet looked at the Blazer's DNA and basically ignored it entirely, producing yet another crossover in a market already drowning in crossovers. One critic put it perfectly when they said naming this thing Blazer was like calling an accountant with nice taste in clothes a pirate captain. It's just not a name it could ever live up to. Number 2. The 2024 Ford Capri EV. If you thought Ford learned its lesson after the Mustang Mach-E controversy, well, they did not. The original Ford Capri was a European legend. Produced from 1968 to 1986, it was essentially Europe's Mustang. A stylish, affordable, rear-wheel drive coupe that ordinary people could actually buy. The marketing tagline was brilliant, the car you always promised yourself. It was available with everything from modest four-cylinder engines to proper V6 power plants, and in places like Britain and Germany, it became a cultural icon. Police forces used them as pursuit vehicles. Racing teams campaigned them with great success. The Capri represented accessible performance with genuine style. So when Ford revived the Capri nameplate in 2024 after a 38-year absence, expectations among European car enthusiasts were understandably high. What they got was an all-electric crossover SUV built on Volkswagen's MEB platform. Not a coupe, not rear-wheel drive, not even a Ford platform. A Volkswagen underneath, wearing a Ford badge, carrying the name of one of Europe's most beloved sports cars. The new Capri debuted at the Goodwood Festival of Speed, and the reaction was exactly what you'd expect. Enthusiasts were furious. The car had virtually nothing in common with the original, aside from the name and the fact that it was built in Cologne, Germany. Ford's European design boss tried to explain that making a retro car wasn't moving them forward. But that reasoning fell flat with anyone who remembered what the Capri actually was. Reports quickly emerged of the Ford-branded Volkswagen-based Capri being a commercial disappointment. And the irony is almost too perfect. Ford had already done this exact same thing with the Mustang Mach-E in America. They saw the controversy, they saw the backlash, and then they turned around and did it again in Europe with the Capri. It's like watching someone touch a hot stove, burn their hand, and then immediately grab the stove with the other hand. Some names should be reimagined carefully. Others should just be left in peace. The Capri, it seems, was the latter. What makes this even more frustrating is that Ford actually had a concept car back in 2003 called the Visos that would have been a perfect basis for a modern Capri. It was a sleek two-door, four-seat coupe that looked like a genuine spiritual successor. The automotive press praised it as the Capri's rightful heir. But Ford shelved it. 20 years later, they brought back the name on a Volkswagen crossover instead. Sometimes the automotive industry's decision-making process is genuinely baffling. Number 1, the Ford Mustang Mach-E. And here we are. Number 1, the most controversial performance car name revival of the modern era and quite possibly of all time, the Ford Mustang. Over 60 years of history. The car that created the pony car segment. The car that gave us the Shelby GT350, the Boss 302, the Mach 1, the GT 500. A name that represents freedom, rebellion, V8 thunder, two doors, rear-wheel drive, and everything that makes American automotive culture special. So Ford, in their infinite wisdom, decided to take that name and put it on an all-electric four-door crossover SUV. Let that sit with you for a moment. During development, the vehicle was originally teased as the Ford Mach-1, which was already controversial enough. But then Ford went further. They didn't just borrow the Mach-1 name, they slapped the actual Mustang badge on it. The galloping horse logo, the whole thing. The public reaction was volcanic. Petitions were launched demanding Ford remove the Mustang name. Longtime Mustang owners publicly declared they would never buy one out of principle. Online forums exploded. The phrase "it's not a Mustang" became a rallying cry for an entire generation of enthusiasts. And here's what makes this the worst name revival of all time. It wasn't just about the car itself. The Mustang Mach-E is actually a decent vehicle. It won Car and Driver's first EV of the Year award. It has genuine performance, especially in GT form. As an electric crossover, it's competitive and well-built. But none of that matters when you've taken perhaps the most sacred nameplate in American automotive history and fundamentally redefined what it means. Ford had dozens of legendary names they could have used. Falcon, Fairlane, Galaxy. They literally owned the rights to Model E. Instead, they chose to alter the identity of the Mustang itself. Every other car on this list misused a famous name on an unworthy product. Ford did something arguably worse. They didn't just disrespect the Mustang legacy, they actively tried to change what the Mustang is. And for that, the Ford Mustang Mach-E takes the #1 spot as the worst performance car name revival of all time. The actual Mustang Coupe is still around, thankfully, but the precedent has been set. And if a name as powerful as Mustang isn't safe from being turned into a crossover, then honestly, no name is. What's next? A Corvette minivan? A Camaro station wagon? At this point, nothing would surprise us. The Mach-E might be a fine electric vehicle, but as a Mustang? As something worthy of carrying the same name as the Boss 429 and the Shelby GT 500? No, not even close. And that's what makes it #1 on this list. It took the most untouchable name in American performance car history and proved that nothing is sacred when quarterly sales targets are on the line. And there you have it, 10 performance car names that deserved so much better than what they got. From rebadged Toyotas to electric crossovers, car companies just can't seem to help themselves when there's a famous name sitting in the vault collecting dust. Which of these revivals bothered you the most? And did we miss any that should have made the list? Let us know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this trip through automotive history's biggest naming disasters, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.